All right, so this is our first podcast ever, a first-time event, and exactly what we're going to discuss is somewhat up in the air. We're going to talk to a couple of the interns here from Southern View Chapel, and we want to hear from them what they've been learning, what's it like to be an intern, and the lessons they're already learning in this process. So we welcome you. We're glad you could join us here for a minute, and we hope this is a time that'll be fruitful and valuable in your life. So what have you guys found to be surprising in your time here? No, so to be clear, Jordan, you came here when?
We came here April 1st, actually, is when we started.
That's
April 1st of this year. It is, yeah. When we...
Are you joking, or is that
right?
Really?
Yeah, it's real. When they told us like they would be moving on April 1st, I was kind of like, man, I really hope we don't like move halfway across the country
Right.
and then get
we
there.
go, nah, just kidding.
Right?
You don't have a job.
April Fools.
Yeah, not only is this not your start date, but we're not going to hire you.
We don't
have
actually
no
want
job.
You can go back
the
to where
house
you
we
came
told
from.
you you could stay in. That's
Right. Yeah.
not a thing.
No, we don't even own that house. You know. So yeah, we've been here since April 1st. So it's almost 9 months at this point, which is crazy how fast it's gone by.
Right.
So I don't know, surprising, I would say.
Unexpected.
Unexpected even would be kind of how fast it has gone.
Okay.
You know, like how quickly schedules fill up, how there is so much to do. And
we had like a choreographed, thought out plan for what was going to happen, and some of that just hasn't happened.
Right.
You've been involved with counseling in particular, quite a bit. Anything in that?
So I actually do enjoy it more than I expected to enjoy it. I kind of thought it would be heavy with, dealing with other people's issues, sin issues, life issues, on top of also obeying the scriptures myself. But surprisingly, it's not been nearly as heavy as I thought it would.
I think one of the coolest things about counseling in general is how much I personally benefit from it.
Yeah.
I'm always surprised how I don't know how much I'm helping somebody else sometimes. I mean, especially the more you meet with people, sometimes you don't see the kind of change. Like they left and you're excited they were going to change and they come back and maybe things didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I find that so often it helps me a great deal, that I fail to see how close I am to the edge with different sins. I've dabbled maybe rather than actually committing to it the way the person sitting in front of me has. But I start to see myself a whole lot when I'm talking to somebody. And I go, wow, I was really close to getting there. And a lot of times it makes me go home and hug my wife more.
Right.
It makes me appreciate my kids.
Right.
In ways that had I not had that conversation with somebody where things have kind of gone upside down for them, I don't know how much I would have appreciated.
Right.
So it's been I guess I find a lot of times it's more of a benefit for me probably than from the person I'm talking to.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's cool how God providentially brings those people into your life because, I've had 2 people who have autism, and Mike, the head counselor here, he mentioned that they've not even had any autistic people ever before.
Right.
And all of a sudden I, who have an experience teaching autistic people.
Right. So before you came here, you were working with
children with autism. Yeah. Right. So that was more behavioral therapy, which is a secular psychology, but coming at it from a biblical mindset, I was applying, I know why they're behaving in such a way as sin, not just because they're human,
Which, what you're saying there is amazing because we think about, there's so many things that jobs and things that we did when we were younger that we don't think really, like that was just a thing I did and I move on from it.
Right.
But it's amazing how often God uses those things and brings them back. They always get like a return in your life in ways that I didn't see that coming.
Right.
And like you said, the fact that we haven't had any counseling cases with autistic children, and then you come, and now we have 2 already.
Right.
Yeah.
So when did you start here?
I started May 1, so a month later than Jordan. And I came from Cape Girardeau, Missouri, where I was on staff full-time with Campus Outreach. And so I went from full-time college ministry to part-time college ministry here, starting up a college ministry at UIS here in town.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I ask you the same question about like what's been unexpected, I kind of already know what your answer is going to be.
Yeah.
But what has been unexpected?
I would say two things. One, staying with it, is the college ministry. And so when I first came, actually, we were not planning on doing it at all. It was something that was maybe a possibility, but we definitely, nothing was solidified.
It was in the works.
It was in
we
the
talked
works.
about it, but yeah.
And there wasn't any expectations or anything like that. And the most surprising thing to me was showing up on campus and having the Lord just drop some students in my lap who I believe are genuine believers, who are showing over this last semester a real hunger and a desire to grow and to know His Word. And it's been really cool. We have a guy named Praise from Nigeria who has just been an absolute encouragement. I've been in college ministry, like I said, for full-time for 4 years before this, and then as a student leader for 3 years before that. And
you were on campuses, or a campus in particular that was much bigger than anything
That's
here
right.
in Springfield.
Yeah, this campus is 2/3 less students than SEMO was. But I've never, even in my whole time of ministry, met a freshman that came in that was as hungry and willing to learn God's Word as him. And so that was very unexpected and very joyful. And to see him be growing this semester and to be about the Word and to be about he was our biggest recruiter for when we had a worship night on campus. He was the one that was inviting the most people. He was knocking on doors in his dorm to get people to come. And so it was just really encouraging and unexpected. I expected a lot of the semester just to be a lot of groundwork of just figuring out the campus.
We talked when you first started. We were hoping 2, maybe 3 students
by the end of the year. That's right. Yeah, at the end of the year. And even past that, I mapped out what it would be really cool 4 years from now if the ministry looked like this. And I looked back at it a couple of weeks ago and where it could be. And we're already in year 3 of 4 of what I thought would probably happen. And so just to see God's just abundant, over the top grace in just clear favor that He's been showing on campus has been incredible.
Well, it's amazing how many times that we think we know the way things are going to go.
Yep.
Right.
We think we know, we've been down there, especially when you've had experience in something. You know, when you've never been down the road before, you know, you're more likely to be open to like a random possibility like that. But when you've already been down the road, you're kind of like, okay, I know what's going to happen. And then it doesn't.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? With the unexpected surprise like that? How do you keep yourself from being proud?
Well, thankfully, in this circumstance for me, it's kept me from being proud because I haven't done anything. Just being honest, a lot of time in college ministry, it was easy to get proud because we do a lot, and we do a lot of recruiting and evangelizing and discipleship, and it's easy to be like, I'm the one doing this.
Right.
In this semester, more than ever, it's been like, I'm not doing this at all. Like, people just kept getting added to. I started with just one guy who I was meeting with on Thursday mornings, going through 1 John, ended the semester with 5 guys. Yep. I didn't personally invite any of them. And so the Lord has just been like, no, this is clearly me. And
but I
not
would say, you know, to be devil's advocate slightly with that.
Sure.
Maybe that's the wrong. Anyway, I would push back on that a little bit to say, no, you are doing things, though.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. You are on campus.
Yep.
You are you're showing up. You're there.
Sure.
Now, we know that God causes the increase, though.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
But we still do something in that process.
Absolutely.
You're still active.
Yeah.
You're still showing up. Because sometimes we get the wrong impression when something booms. We're like, oh, wow, it's just luck, or, you know, or something.
Yeah, sure. He uses our faithfulness.
Right. I think you hit it on the head, though. We were doing the work. You know, we are doing that, but it is Him who provides the
increase.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think that keeping that in mind is what keeps pride down, because you're not focused on yourself and the work that you are doing, but you're focused on who's actually providing the increase.
Yep.
And sometimes it seems like pride really seeps in the system.
Right.
When you get further away from it and you're kind of looking back. At least I know that's happened to me at times. Right. You know, you look back and you start to see, start counting the victories.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And that's when, like, maybe in the moment, sometimes it's not really there, or I don't realize it's there.
Yeah.
And then later you start looking back and you go, oh, look at this.
You start reflecting on your work rather than what God had done.
Is this not Babylon the Great that I have built?
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
And then Lord,
yeah.
You know?
I think the other thing that was unexpected about the internship so far was how much I've enjoyed seminary. I did not like school. I'll just be candid and honest, and I could not wait for it to get over when I was in college. I I mean, still the structure of school is not my favorite with, papers and things of that nature, but I actually care about what I'm learning.
Right.
And so it makes me, what unexpected is I'm spending more time doing the work than I did in undergrad, where in undergrad I was just trying to get the grade and move on.
Right.
But here that's not really the point. The point is to learn it and digest it and to be
Right.
able, and then to be able to, which I've learned from this class, to be able to reteach it. That the true test of knowledge is not how much you know, but how much you're able to teach to someone else.
Right.
And so that's been really helpful, and I've really enjoyed it because of that. But it's also been unexpected because I'm required to spend more time on it than I thought I would be, because I enjoy it and I want to make sure that I'm doing a good job and I'm getting the most out of it. So, which was different than my undergrad experience.
Yeah, and I've never had anything push me like having to teach.
Yeah.
Because you're afraid, in a good sense, of passing it on to other people wrong.
Yeah.
And it cements in your own head in such a strong way when you now have to distill it down to a bite-sized portion and then decide what to leave out. So you learn all this stuff and then you decide, what do I need to leave out? And then I still also have to make this interesting.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about it that much, you're just cementing it in the mind. It's, to me, it's about as effective as like scripture memory.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certain books of the Bible that I've taught repeatedly, I don't have them memorized, but I've kind of got a good running outline of them in my brain because I've taught it repeatedly. And I found that to be surprising how much that gets the Word of God in the mind. Once, like you said, once you have to teach it to somebody, that changes the game.
And it can reveal how much maybe you didn't know.
Yeah.
You could be confident in something and then go to teach it and be like, oh,
Yeah.
I have no idea what to say.
Yeah,
because
which is what my seminary professor has been talking about a lot. Is just that knowledge is like, we can have it in our head, but if I can't communicate it to someone else, it's like, what value is it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's valuable to me, but how can I, if I can't communicate that to others, how well do I really know it?
Right.
So that the teaching is actually the test of how well do I really know whatever I'm talking about.
Right.
I found all these years teaching young people in particular, I found that I can teach to adults in a certain way that I can't get away with when I'm teaching like junior hires. If I'm teaching junior hires, it has to be on the bottom shelf, and I feel like you have to know it better
Right.
to pass it on that level.
Yeah.
Because you can't use the big words anymore.
Yep.
I read a quote somewhere, I don't know where, it was years ago, but it said, if you don't know it well enough to teach it to a kindergartner, you don't know it well enough. And that's, I mean, I think that's very revealing, because you can't use words like ecumenical or epistemology with a kindergartner. They're not going to have any idea what that means.
Well, I mean, I remember years ago, one of my kids, he's like 14 now, so it's like 13. No, he wasn't one doing this. Anyway, he's a little boy. He's like 3 years old, and he was asking me about the Trinity. And you've studied it
as a 3-year-old,
right?
Yeah.
He was that boy had some incredible questions as a little bitty guy, and he would wrestle around with some thoughts, and then he'd ask questions about the Trinity, and it's like, I can't break this down like I do to an adult, to a high school student, or to even a little kid. This is a child, a little bitty child, and how do I help encourage his faith?
Yeah.
While explaining this I mean, that's maybe the most difficult thing in the world to explain.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like you said, if I can learn to break that down to that level, I don't know how well I did.
Sure.
You have to ask him, and even then he wouldn't remember it anymore. But I remember at the time thinking exactly what you're saying. It's like, I can explain this to an adult, but I don't know that I can break this down to the 3-4-year-old level.
I could defend this to my dad, who knows theology, and he believes what I believe, but how do I break it down enough to explain it to them?
That's good. Tell us a little bit about your family background.
Yeah. So my parents were missionaries to Brazil before I was born. Fast forward a few years, and I'm born, and no longer in Brazil. They couldn't go back for financial reasons. Several years go by. We're living in Iowa at that time, and we moved to Oklahoma, where my dad becomes a pastor again. So he starts going back into ministry. So that was kind of what I grew up in, was a Christian home. I accepted Christ at a young age, but then I strayed. So
that's the common narrative,
right? Yeah. So I didn't live like a Christian except at home, where I would have gotten in trouble
Yep.
because my dad was a pastor. A.
Where it was a pressurized environment where you kind of had to
Right.
walk the line to a
Right.
certain degree.
So that's largely how I behaved through high school. With my dad still being a pastor. He's still a pastor in Oklahoma now. So I come from, just a little bit more about my family, 2 brothers, 2 sisters. So we were always close. We're very spread out in age. So from oldest to youngest.
And in geographical location, right?
Oh, yeah,
It's
and in
very spread out.
geographical location, yeah. In fact, one will be moving to Okinawa soon for a couple
Oh.
years because they're in the military. And so we're getting even more spread
Yeah,
out.
that's-
Yeah.
yeah.
So I come into the middle from California, and then they decide to, or the military decides for them to move them to Okinawa. So a little bit more about my family. My mom passed away about 2 years ago. So that's something we've been dealing with. And some of us have used the time to grow closer to Christ, and some have unfortunately gone away from Christ in that time.
Right.
So those are unique challenges that come as you get older, even in life, just things that are happening and how
Yeah, I
you're...
don't think there's ever an easy time to lose your mom.
No. But, maybe when you're 90, that's an okay time,
If you're 90,
Right.
so your mom's like 115.
Right, yeah, 115, that seems like, okay, she's
I don't know.
ready.
Maybe then you've been living with her for 90 years or
Right.
been around her for 90
Yeah,
years.
it's
It might
true.
be hard then. I don't
Fair
know.
enough, yeah.
I haven't asked too many 90-year-olds with a 120-year-old mom.
Right.
How
Doesn't
that's
tend to
working.
happen. Yeah.
No.
But there was hope because she was a Christian,
Right.
So we have that. We don't mourn as those who have no hope. But we still mourn.
Yeah, exactly.
There's still a mourning there.
So, Aaron, tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so I grew up probably polar opposite of that. So I grew up, we were Catholic, but we basically only went on holidays, maybe a little more than that when I was younger, but not much that I can remember.
You were Creasters.
Yeah, basically Creasters, and my parents were split before I was even born. And so I grew up with just me, my mom, and my brother in Phoenix, Arizona for most of my life. And then in high school, I moved back to Jacksonville, Illinois with my dad. And it wasn't until I got to college at Southeast Missouri State where I heard the gospel for the first time, public university, but there's a ministry there on campus called Campus Outreach, and my RA, in God's sovereignty and providence, like you were talking about earlier, my RA was one of the leaders in that ministry who has been trained and equipped to share his faith and to lead Bible studies. And for a whole year and a half, he pursued me with the gospel. And I
What
wanted...
did that look like? How did he pursue you?
So it started with a friendship. It started with a genuine friendship that he really took the time to befriend me and my friends that were on the dorm floor, and really
But what did he just come over and say, "Hey man, how you doing? I'm..."
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he literally just walked up, "Hey, I'm Nathan." Sat right down and we just started talking.
Did he play Madden with you?
He did. It didn't go well.
Did you smoke him?
I did, unfortunately. He's not a Madden player though, but he really exemplified 1 Corinthians 9. That's what I cared about, especially when I was lost even more.
And just for anybody who would watch this, they need to know that you're a Madden.
I don't know if they need
Specialist.
to know that.
He's in the top 1% of all online Madden players.
Right. So
Yeah.
clearly this guy got smoked. But anyway,
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah,
So he sat down, humbled himself, played
That's
Madden,
right.
got smoked.
Went to lunches, went to work out at the gym together, joined the same flag football team, all of these things in a genuine effort. He was on mission to share the gospel with the guys that were on his floor. We lived on all
How many guys
freshmen,
were on the floor?
all freshmen, 34 guys
Oh, okay.
on a dorm floor with the one RA. And so he had a Bible study every week that was designed specifically for
How many of you guys of the 34 showed up to the Bible
So
study?
that's almost none. So we basically all as a group talked about him of we got to avoid this guy around Bible study time because he's going to knock. And sometimes I can remember we would be in the room and we would just pretend like we weren't in the room when he would knock. This is what was happening. This is where my heart was at.
That's actually hilarious because you were Bible study phobic.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? You were-
Yeah. Well, at first I
With everything having a phobia now.
That's right.
You know, a bunch
and,
of
I heard him out
young,
at
strong
first.
college guys afraid of.
Yeah. And but he was just so persistent and faithful, and we wouldn't come to Bible study, so he would share the gospel with us over lunch. He would share the gospel while we were working out, and he was just so faithful. And for a year and a half, I just pushed back because I just loved my sin, and I just saw what he was saying.
But you still kept talking with him.
Well, sort of. I kept talking with him on a friendship level because he really won me as a friend.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be around him, and I enjoyed being around him. But I didn't.
Because he was still having connection with
That's
you
right.
through
these other
regular
avenues.
activities around.
Yep. And
But he wasn't. Was he a student at the school?
He was a student.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a student. He was only a year older than me. He was a sophomore.
Okay.
He became a Christian his freshman year, and then
Wow.
went on summer project with Campus
So
Outreach.
I know I'm fast forwarding
Go
here,
ahead.
but it's very different when a peer.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you were like 20.
18.
Okay, so you're 18. This dude's 19.
Mm-hmm.
It's very different when a 19-year-old who's in college with you comes alongside you and
That's right.
and does all this versus somebody who's on staff
That's right.
with a campus ministry
Yeah.
who's now 23.
That's right.
And you how does that?
No, that's very helpful. And so once I was in full time ministry, really
Yeah.
fast forwarding, I
Yeah.
ended up coming to Christ, and now
Right.
I'm in full time ministry. I would have conversations with students where they would say, "I can't wait till I get to be in full time ministry because then I'll have greater influence like you." And the thing I would always tell them was, the greatest influence you have is right now.
Yeah.
Like, you actually have more influence with your friends than I do as the
Oh,
campus
yeah.
minister. And for whatever reason, when you're in the moment, sometimes it's hard to see that, but it's just true. And it's like the fact that he was my peer, like he was my friend,
Yeah.
like a genuine friend. I knew I could count on this guy. That's what kept me around him. Even when I didn't like his message, it was condemning my sin, right?
Where if it had been a 23-year-old when you're 18,
It would have just been easy to blow him off.
I was going to say you
Right.
might have just created
Yeah.
more naturally had the distance.
That's right. And what the craziest part about this whole story is that whole year, no one came to Christ on the dorm floor. Not a single one of us guys. Within 6 months after that year, after we all moved out that floor, 5 of us came to Christ and are still walking with God today, which is just a crazy testimony to God's faithfulness. And that it's
Yeah, that you plant seed, you don't
That's
know
right.
what God's going to do with
that
it.
you
Right.
plant seeds and God will do what he desires and save his people. And it's just really cool. I mean, some of my best friends were on that dorm floor, lost with me as a freshman, and are now walking with God and are living godly lives and married to
You still
and have
talk
children.
to the dude?
All the time. Absolutely.
That's
all
awesome.
the time. He's one of my best friends. After he graduated, he went and served as a missionary in Thailand for 2 years.
Right on.
So I didn't get to see him a lot then, but just one of the biggest influence in my life because of his persistence with me. And then when I eventually did come to Christ as a sophomore, I kind of got to rock bottom and saw my need for Christ finally, and God
Right.
opened my eyes and I was saved. My whole picture of what does a Christian do was him.
Yeah.
And so I immediately came back, and I was an RA at that point, and I was like, what
Yeah,
do I
man,
do?
that
I just did
though,
what he
is
did.
That's scary,
Oh yeah.
right? When you realize that kind of influence,
Yes,
the power of
yeah.
influence, and how this is, a lot of people, in this era, it seems that it's become unpopular to preach obedience
Mm-hmm.
as a Christian. But you think of the power of the example
Yeah.
that this man set for you.
Yep.
And had he been licentious, had he been, loose
Yeah.
in his morals and other such things, imagine
Yeah.
the kind of impact that has on a new convert.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And just his missional pursuit, like he was on mission. Like he was an RA for the purpose of, there's lost guys on this floor that I can build relationship with. And so then when I came to Christ, I didn't even know like I said, I
Did
didn't
you
grow
ever
up in
ask him if
church.
he was discouraged
Oh,
during
yeah.
that year?
And he said, absolutely, all
Yeah.
the time. I'm just being, he was all the time. He was like, is this worth it?
Yeah, this is
Like-
going nowhere.
Like I know these guys are like, we think we were slick, but he knew we were in the room ignoring him. Right. And like,
Right.
he's like, is this really worth it? And looking at the end of the year, the answer could potentially be no, if you were looking at it from a worldly or a human perspective, because
Yeah.
none of us came to Christ. But
Right.
again, that goes into we're called to be faithful and plant seeds. We never, and then six months later,
Yeah,
5 of us are walking with God.
We're called to be faithful, not to be productive.
Yeah, but
that level.
and then once I came to Christ, I didn't know. I didn't grow up in church. I didn't know what the word evangelism was, or even that you were supposed to do it.
Right.
I just knew that he did that. I was like, this is what a Christian does. A Christian tries to persuade
other people.
Right.
people to be Christians. And so that's what I did. I just started and then obviously once I got more involved in the ministry in the church, they started to disciple me and things of that nature. But when I came back after I became a Christian, I became a Christian at New Year's conference, which is the ministry's like winter conference. And when I came back, I was just like, I just got to tell people. This
Yeah.
is what he does, like what he did. Like I want to build relationships and
Well,
share the
that's-
gospel.
That is, in some ways, automatic. Ought to be automatic for the heart of any person who's converted to Christ.
Yeah.
That is, I've been saved
Right.
from hell. I've been saved from my own sin. It's natural for that. It ought to be natural for that to well up in the soul and
Yeah.
want to share.
Yep.
When it doesn't happen is when you're worried.
Yeah.
Right.
But the fact that you had an example in front of you that was
Yep.
very clearly doing that.
Yeah, even just the how to on like as an
Right.
example. Like I didn't know what I was doing. But I knew I should go knock around on doors. I should eat lunch with guys and build a friendship with them
Right.
and go to the gym with them and things like that. It was just so
That's one of the
helpful.
things that's really, I don't know, cool. That's not even an effective enough word, but it's one of the things that's really powerful about being on a secular university campus.
Yeah,
You were not on a secular university campus.
Right.
So the ministry there changes. You are the RA now,
Right.
right? And but you're on a Christian
Right. I
Bible
went to a
college
Bible
campus.
college. Yeah.
Right. What did that look like as an RA?
So it was a lot less active evangelism.
Yeah.
Just because, we were at least on campus.
Yeah.
So to be fair, I also wasn't on campus a whole lot. I had a full-time job at Starbucks. And so I was at Starbucks, and that's where I would do most of my getting to know people and
Yeah.
telling them about Christ. But as an RA on a Bible college campus, I dealt with people who were struggling with the obedience that they knew they should,
Yep.
right? Because, going to a Bible college doesn't mean you're free of temptation or the struggle for obedience. And so you had people who, on a wide variety in there, who were at different stages in their spiritual walk and were trying to figure out, okay, I have a whole new boundary of freedom that I'd never had before. How do I continue walking with Christ, and how do I...
You're helping them in a different stage. You're helping
Right.
them to grow up.
Right. Yeah. And, I had a couple of guys who did not know Christ.
Right.
And I helped them see like, hey, the reason you're struggling so much is because you don't have the Holy Spirit inside of you. You're struggling because that's not your identity.
Yeah.
And helping them
Well,
see
part
that
of
that's
the
what they
effort
needed.
too, in a Bible college setting, quite often is to get people actually off campus a bit,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you can get so insulated
Get them out of their bubble.
that you get lopsided.
Same thing was
Absolutely.
true at public university.
Yeah.
Like people get in their cliques and their friends, and I was able to always get a little further with guys once I could, if we can get them off campus. If I could be like, hey, let's go to Burritoville. That was the place in Missouri we always went to. All the students wanted to go to.
Sounds fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like if I can get him there, away from all of his friends, or if it's a fraternity guy outside of his fraternity house, where
Right.
there's not pressure and he can just be honest and
What
just
about
be
the
real.
Christian cliques though that were on campus? Did they get insulated like that too?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
So they just got kind of fat and happy within their own little clump.
Yeah, that definitely happened. And so our ministry, which I'll be forever thankful for, was very evangelistic and very like we should come together and we should fellowship. We should have a ton of fun together, absolutely. But we should also be going out and evangelizing. So I've been very thankful for that. That's not to say that there weren't still cliques within even our own ministry who would
Right.
just, we're just going to hang out in Starbucks together all day. Right. So that definitely still happened. But
It just tends to foment in a different way, at least in my experience in a Bible college setting, where it's easy to be just happy
Sure.
within your own crowd.
yes.
And
Yes.
to fail
Content,
to see
to be
the
content.
dying world around you.
Yeah, the reality. Yeah, just not wanting to see it, almost in a sense. Yeah,
Another struggle on the Bible college campus would be trying not to see the Bible as just a textbook, right? Because you go to 5 classes a day or
Yep.
whatever you're doing, and all of those are using the Bible as a part of the course curriculum. And so how do I go beyond just studying it for getting a grade and writing a paper? How do I actually apply this to my life? And part of that was getting off of campus.
Yeah,
You
that's
know?
true.
Yeah.
You're dealing with passages that tell you to go make disciples.
Yeah.
You're dealing with passages that tell you to do all of these things. It's like, well, you can't do all of those things sitting here on your butt. And
I think part of it too is even just acknowledging to yourself that the reality that familiarity does breed contempt.
yes,
Right.
it does.
The more used to this I get, the more likely it is for it to become just something I do.
right. Yeah.
So I think you're right. Getting off of the campus, getting outside of that
Right.
environment,
Right.
bubble as people like to call it, is essential
Right.
in a lot of ways.
And that comes back to kind of how we started this with, if you don't know it well enough to teach it, you don't know it well enough. And so you can't really, there are not as many opportunities as you would like to do the teaching on campus, right?
No, right.
You're getting poured into on campus. So
Yeah.
you've got to find an outlet to use the knowledge that you've been gaining. And if you don't, then knowledge puffs up, right? So you're just going to be full of it. In fact, I saw, sadly, several people who went astray because they had all of this knowledge, and so they bred contempt, right? And so you, instead of applying the knowledge...
Except it's a lopsided knowledge always when that happens, right?
Yeah.
Because any true knowledge of God, any true growth in Christ is always going to be coupled with humility.
Right.
A growth in humility at the same time. And yet, lopsided growth of just knowledge, that is an improper bit of knowledge, is that you're learning this aspect,
Right.
but you're clearly not learning all. You're not getting the whole counsel of God in that way.
And well, John 14:15, Jesus says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And so you can know that, but if you're not doing it, if you're not actually applying the knowledge, it's going to be a lopsided knowledge because there's no love in that
Well,
knowledge.
I think that's part of the advantage that's built into an environment that has so many people that don't love Christ in it.
Right.
Where sometimes in the Bible college setting that I've, been witness to over the years, is that you can live entirely on the campus.
Right.
So there's not as immediate of an audience, not as immediate of a ministry that you need to have.
Right.
You're just thinking about it in I'm just hanging out with my friends.
Yeah.
Right.
It's much easier, in my way of thinking anyway, to be intentional in the setting that Aaron was in.
Right.
But that's part of how I'm put together.
Sure.
I know other people that were at even Bible college with me that I think they were very much on mission.
Right.
They were paying attention to these things.
Right.
But I struggled to see it as clearly. So having a job off campus, like you mentioned.
Oh yeah. I mean,
very
that's
helpful.
That's one of the first questions I would ask people who are struggling. I was like, well, when was the last time you were off campus? For starters, have you been trapped here for 3 months?
Right,
You might want to get out. And then also, do you have a job?
Yep.
Because I think it's easy for people in our generation to just go through college not working, which I find okay, wow, how do you have that much money? And also
or how are you willing to go into that much debt?
Right. Yeah. Either way, how are you using that much money?
Right.
Yeah. And, if they didn't, it's okay, why not? Because are you lazy? Because if you're lazy in that area, you might be lazy in your spiritual walk.
Well, I also found it was really easy in those settings from Bible college students that I've talked to through the years to not have an actual time alone with God.
Yeah.
Because you're in these classes.
Right.
And you go to 5 different classes in a day, and all of them touch the Bible.
Right.
But none of it's as personal as it ought to be.
Right.
It's not time alone with God.
Right. I mean, if your homework is in Genesis, you're not wanting to read Genesis as your personal Devo time. Or and then if you,
even though it could be,
yeah, it'd
but
be
you've
great.
decided,
Right.
I learned enough there.
Right. And so it's harder to figure out, okay, what do I want to read because of that?
Right. Yeah. Interesting dilemmas in whatever setting that we find ourselves in.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully this has been helpful as you get to know us a little bit and you get to know the interns here at Southern View. And hopefully we'll have many more of these, but we'll see. Give us some feedback and let us know your thoughts and comments and snide remarks. We'd love to hear from you. We'll see you.